Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Ellen calling in from the beautiful island of St. Bart's, and you are listening to Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers.
And sister.
You better believe that, Ellen.
Yep. So everybody, welcome to episode 354 of Light Talk.
354.
Can you believe it?
On our way to 1,000.
Right. Hey, I'm sorry I missed last week's show. I was in Stan's state, Florida. And let me tell you, talk about a regressive place. I've never seen anything like it.
Were you down there for a DeSantis rally? Were you trying to get the great man's signature?
It's pretty amazing, that state. I grew up there. I just can't believe it's the same place now. You know, the one thing I discovered is that they don't have state income tax there, but they do have toll roads. And I think they make up so much money with the toll roads, they don't need a state income tax. Every road is a toll road.
Right, and apparently death taxes are pretty good there too. So people say don't die in New York, make sure you die in Florida.
That's a good state motto. Be sure you die in Florida.
That's one reason not to get married. I don't have to worry about where I die. I can die anywhere. I don't care.
You can still die anywhere. You know, you should be cremated and get those little lipstick styes, ashes holders, and just give them all out as swag when you die. And I could have like a little bit of David hanging around my neck.
Yeah, you just give it out the next LDI when we do a show.
Yeah,
there,
right.
You know?
In the shot glasses.
The shot glass. Yeah, put a little ash in the shot glass. They'll be called shot glasses.
Those shot glasses are, I mean, that's class act there. People want those. Those are collector items.
It's good to be back with you two.
Did you go see the mouse?
No. I did my time with the mouse. I don't need any more mouse time. Lori and I went down actually for a visit with my brother and his wife, saw my friend and his wife in Ocala, and that was it. Even Stan says, hey, drive another hour north and see us. I said, nope. I saw you 2 weeks ago. I don't need to see you guys. I want to get out of this state as soon as possible.
You and your brother watched like football games together?
Yes, we watched football games together. We watched the college games. It was nice. It was a nice bonding time. But cool. Yeah, so, and of course, Lori and I both got sick. Not COVID. We just both got killer colds. So we're both recovering from them right now. So There you go. So let's get started. Hey, today, we have a little bit of news first. This past week was Tharon Musser's birthday. And, Tharon passed, back in 2009, was it?
2009.
And she was a very important, she was probably, in my opinion, the greatest lighting designer of all time. But, that's just, arguably an opinion. But I think most people feel that way. And she positively affected many people's lives, including my own. And Kirk Bookman just had a post on Facebook about it. And we're going to talk a little bit about her for our Let's Talk About segment today. So hang out with us for about another 25 minutes and you'll hear our tribute to Tharon. Is there any other news today that we want to talk about? How's the weather there in St. Bart's?
It's a little rainy today, but probably in the high 80s. And the rain's been coming and going. So it's good for the garden and good for the cistern. This is an island where 90% of the buildings have a cistern, and we collect rainwater because there's no fresh water here at all. So you need something.
Do you ever run out or you always get enough rain?
Well, when you run out, you can use, most places at this point have city water. They did put in a desalination plant and water pipes everywhere, but you try not to use it because it's pretty expensive.
How many gallons in your cistern?
Well, we have 80 cubic meters. I do not know how to translate that to gallons.
Okay. So more than like 10.
Yeah. Let me see if I can figure this out online.
Well, do you bathe with fresh water, or do you use like salt water to bathe in?
No. There's no way to get salt water.
Oh, okay. You're on an island. Maybe there's no way to get salt water.
Well, how would you get it to your house?
Well, you go down to the beach and you skinny dip. You don't go back to...
Must be right. 80 cubic meters is 21,000 gallons.
Wow. 21,000 gallons. That's a lot of water.
Since you're on the internet there, how many gallons in an average backyard swimming pool?
Oh, my God. We are really going off the rails today. We've got important questions to answer from our listeners.
An average swimming pool is 18 to 20,000 gallons. So you could fill the pool with our cistern.
Wow, that's a big cistern.
Yeah, but you don't want to run out of water. And then you learn to manage it so that if there's a 4 or 5 month drought, you don't have to buy a lot of water. And some people who, sometimes the city water is out for various reasons, or the desal plant can't produce enough, and people try to buy truckloads of water, which is really expensive.
How much water do you lose to iguanas?
Not much to iguanas, but you lose a fair amount to evaporation. So that's what's happening here.
Okay, that's how about you, Steve? What's the weather like in Dallas?
It's cold. We're going to be in the teens for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, it's cold here too. We're going to be in the 60s for the next week. So.
Yeah, but you have a stable electric grid. I don't. So that's what I'm worried about. Texas isn't so bad. The thing that really sold me on the state were the armadillos. Those things are they're cuddly. They're lovable little creatures.
Maybe we should bring armadillos next year.
We could have the armadillos of Texas racing against the iguanas of St. Bart's.
There you go.
We have an armadillo that lives in our backyard. We call him Speed Bump. And
Speed Bump.
That's so funny.
Okay, there you go. All right, well, let's get started. Steve has our first question of the day.
And it comes from Betty in New England, and she writes, do you think a student should program their own show or use a programmer? Well, Betty, that's not the question. The question is, how do you become a designer? And I think this idea of students programming, it's neither good nor bad. It's just a step in the progress. When you started, you probably started as a stagehand. And then one day they said, you can be a follow spot operator. Then you progressed to light board operator. Then you were the fabled programmer. Then you became an assistant. So I think students, particularly, and you say, should a student program? Yeah, all along the process, you're learning new skills and you're learning how equipment works, and you're experiencing this. I think when you're out there working at a LORT theater, I don't think I'd want to be a programmer. I'd want to be just looking at the stage and paying attention to what's going on there. But in the lead up to that, sure, why not program a show? David, what do you do with your students?
I'm retired now. I no longer teach. I am
Say
done.
It's not true.
It's true. I'll tell you what I did and what I believe in, and it's pretty much the same as what you said. I believe programming, especially now with the technology out there and what's happening in the industry, where you're getting a lot of designer programmers, especially if you're doing any sort of live event type of design, that you really need to know how to program. You really need to know how to use multiple types of consoles. I think it's really important because even going back to other professions, if you look at other professions, you work, like Steve said, you work your way up. So a lot of times that you'll be hired as a programmer and then eventually become a designer. And also, I believe that being a programmer and actually learning how to program, you actually become a better designer because you understand the tools better. It's just part of the way that it works in the theater. So, yeah, absolutely. When I had a graduate program, and actually even in the undergraduate programs, we had student designers and student programmers. And usually the programmers would be like second-year students in undergrad and like first-year design students in graduate school. And then once they do that, then they move on to designing. What I don't believe in is being a designer programmer on a show as a student. I just think it's too much work and too much responsibility that a designer, when they're learning in the laboratory as a student, really needs to be free of the programming. So I believe there should be a separate programmer. Plus, the student misses out on that very important designer programmer language that occurs, that collaboration that needs to be developed. That's a skill in itself. That's just the way I work.
Well, yeah, I think that, learning to program is really important. And there are some people out there, like, the Benny Kirkhams of the world, who are like the best programmers out. I mean, there's a lot of them. That's just the name that pops into mind. And it is a great career for a lot of people. So this student might decide somewhere along the way to actually not be a designer and to stick with programming. And there's some pretty exciting opportunities out there.
Let me tell you something. You'll make a lot more money programming than you will as being a designer. That's just the way it is there. And also, I was just thinking about Battle of the Busk. Busking, if you don't know how to program, you can't busk, right? If you look at someone like Chris Kuroda from Fish, this is a great designer, programmer, busker. And he's like at the top of his game. And there are many programmers like that out there, designers, I should say, live event designers. So I think that's really, really important and a very good point, Alan. I really do.
Well, look how far Battle of the Busk took those 3 students that were doing that. They had never worked on a Grand MA before. And after some intensive classwork, they were really going at it and doing some good work. It was a great opportunity.
Well, I don't understand why people don't take advantage of opportunities like this. I'm glad these 3 students did, but there should be like tons of people like banging down the doors.
Yeah, well, Battle of the Busk, there were 4 consoles and 2 lighting people and 2 video people per team.
Right.
So they all had, the video people had a Pixera media server and the lighting people were on various consoles. So there were quite a few of them involved in that project.
So like 9 people then, right?
Well, no, 4 times 4, 16.
16, okay.
Half were video, half were lighting, so.
Are you all going to do that again next year,
Oh,
Ellen?
absolutely. It was very exciting.
Wonderful. It was exciting and a great, great opportunity.
Yep.
All right, Ellen, you have the next question.
Okay, so here's an interesting question. Josh from Orlando wants to know how to imitate old-fashioned limelight with gel or LED colors. I looked up limelight, and it turns out that in 1837, they actually used limelight in Covent Garden for a juggler. And it was the first use of it by creating an intense white beam produced by heating a piece of lime, aka calcium oxide, in a flame burning oxygen and hydrogen. So that's what meant to be in the limelight, because you were standing in the middle of that beam. How do you like that?
That's right.
That's good.
And the light was very intense. And apparently that's why the green room was called green, because it hurt their eyes. And when they went into a room to sort of relax their eyes, the green paint was what was the most relaxing. So they went from the limelight to the green room.
Wow, I didn't know that.
How do you like that?
I had never heard that either. That's amazing bit of trivia there.
Well, I hope that's true because I read it online. But
it's
the question is, right, so the question is, if you want that kind of intense beam that was actually produced by heating a piece of lime in front of a flame, burning oxygen and hydrogen, how would you do that with gel colors or LED colors?
Right. Well, LED you can mix to just about any color you want if you have good source. So that wouldn't be that difficult. The question is, what is the color of limelight?
Right.
Have you ever seen limelight engaged? Have you ever seen it actually working?
No.
I was wondering how much of a flicker there is to it also, because it's combusting something.
I bet there was a flicker. I
assume it burns fairly cleanly. I don't think they'd have a little smoky haze at the front of the stage.
Now, it's funny because I'm actually looking at the Pantone colors of limelight, and it is sort of a very light greenish yellow. Now, here's the interesting thing. We're going to talk about Tharon later, but Tharon used to use a color called Roscoe 869, which was called pale yellow green. And this is pretty close to that color from what I'm looking at right now. And that was a very beautiful color on skin. People have always wondered why she used this a lot. I mean, matter of fact, she used it so often that the Broadway electricians actually created a little pendant for her that she wore around her neck with a piece of 869 in it. And it was really kind of cute. She always wore this little necklace with this pendant. I told Ellen and Steve earlier that I actually remounted a production for her in Miami. I believe it was 42nd Street. And she had a box boom wash circuit of 869. And it was beautiful. It looked beautiful on people. So that was probably the closest thing that I see now to limelight, although this looks a little greener than 869. So I don't know. I don't know what the original color was.
I don't know. I found an interesting note here that said it was useful in the theater because it was an aggressive white light that emulated the sunlight. And actually, here's another word, flattering. They use flattering in there too.
Isn't sunlight something like 6,000 Kelvin?
Yeah, it could be anywhere between 5,000 and 6,500 Kelvin. It's a very blue light. It's not a yellow light.
Well, here, limelight is not toxic to humans, but it is toxic to cats and dogs.
You mean the light itself or the lime?
The lime. So you
don't eat it.
Don't take your dog or cat to the theater with you.
Right. Well, it is funny because people will still say, oh, they're in the limelight, and maybe don't even know what that refers to.
Right.
So I don't know if we answered your question, but it's going to be some sort of mixture of yellow and green. Patty from Queens asks, I am a 22-year-old woman just getting into the profession. I was hired as a staff assistant lighting designer for a small regional theater company. Ever since I stepped into the theater, the men on the crew have been very critical of my work. Worse, they leer at me and make sexual comments in front of me and behind my back. I feel totally disrespected. I don't want to quit as I know how difficult it is to get an opportunity like this. What can I do to improve this situation? Well, it seems to me that this is a classic example of a hostile workplace.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is something that Ann Militello will talk to you about, forever and ever. And women who, like did rock and roll lighting in the early days, and they'd walk into a theater and say, hey guys, can we start unloading these, whatever? And they'd go, yeah, when the lighting designer gets here, we'll see what they want to do. And she's like, I am the lighting designer. And they're like, yeah, right. So that was more of sort of not believing they were the designer as opposed to out and out sexual harassment, which is terrible. And whoever is in charge of that workplace should be notified immediately.
Right. And, a lot of it depends on what the size of the company is. If this happened in a university, most universities have like Title IX investigators, and it's a very structured type of investigation that happens. There's a process and all that. However, in any case, you must immediately notify whoever your supervisor is, if that's a production manager,
right?
Because you say you're on staff, that means probably a production manager is your supervisor. Don't try to deal with it yourself. Don't go up to the stagehand or whoever is giving you harassment and say, hey, stop harassing me. You don't want to get into a bad position. I would definitely take this up the rung here because no one should be treating you like that. I know that when I would bring assistants with me, that sometimes this would happen and I would put a stop to it immediately. But I would go right to the production manager. And if that didn't work, I'd go up again, to like the company manager. So you got to immediately nip this in the bud because that's not only disrespectful, it's illegal. And no one should be treated that way. And those days, we think these days are over, but they're not. Unfortunately,
no, that's
in some
the sad
places.
thing. That is really the sad thing that still exists.
Yeah, and it's terrible,
especially when you're the only woman on a crew.
Right.
Sometimes like people ask, like young women say, like, well, if I go out on a tour and they travel on a tour bus and I'm the only woman, should I go? I'm like, nope.
Yeah, right. And again, we're talking about Tharon Musser. For years, Marilyn Renegal was her partner, and she assisted her sometimes, but she was also a lighting designer of her own right. And Marilyn would tell me stories about how crews would handle her, would deal with her in the 70s. And she said that she would always wear a jacket because she felt that she was respected more wearing that than she was if she came in a dress or something like that. Now, in the 70s and 60s, it was really horrible for women in the United States, especially in the 60s. But I think nowadays you should be able to wear whatever you want to wear that you feel comfortable in. Anyway, I just think that it's a situation where you really need to immediately inform whoever your supervisor is. And believe me, if they're smart, they will take care of it, or else you can actually sue them for a hostile workplace environment. They know. I mean, just people know nowadays you can't get away with that shit anymore.
Right.
I was actually thinking of Nancy Kerrigan, the skater. She used to show up at the arena and she would be really nervous about skating, or who knows, but I always thought she was just nervous. She would show up at load-in, and she would, one by one, carry potted plants around the arena, because usually the skating rink had plants or flowers around it. And she would just take it upon herself to be the person who set that up every day. And she would work with the floral crew. But it was interesting because no one knew it was Nancy Kerrigan doing it. And then she would come and skate that night, and people would go, "Oh, that was that skinny girl we saw earlier in the day." But even doing that, there was still, there's still those one or two guys on the crew that are going to be harassing women. There's no stopping them other than firing them.
Yeah, you fire them. That's basically what you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the crew boss needed to be doing and needs to do across the country. But, I mean, for some reason, there is just this massive double standard that has never gone away. And I guess it starts, maybe it starts in elementary school. I don't know. It's very strange. It is very strange.
There are a lot of things that have never gone away. You know, that it's hard to believe that there's in the 21st century that people still think this way.
I was just going to say, you have to wonder if those guys grew up in a household where their father treated their mother in a, some sort of a demeaning manner. So they think it's okay behavior.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm certainly not a psychiatrist, but it seems to me it's always about power.
Right.
And trying to have power over someone.
Yeah, and they're insecure.
Right.
Especially when it comes to electricians and lighting designers. Some electricians wanted to be lighting designers, and they couldn't cut it as lighting designers. And anyone that comes in, whether it's a man or woman, they're going to try to prove that they know more. And when it's a woman, it's even worse. I believe me, I've even run into people like that, who, when I was a younger designer, who would try just to prove that I didn't know what I was doing, which, really isn't hard to do when you think about it. But
I think of a friend of mine who's a successful designer, and pretty successful. And it's not Anne, but it's someone of that same stature. She showed up one day at a Broadway stage and walked on stage and said, "Okay, I'd like to start with whatever." And someone turned to her and said, "Who do you think you are?" Because,
right.
And she looked at them and said, "I think I'm the bitch paying your salary."
There you go.
And they snapped to right away.
That's pretty funny.
Patty, don't say that. Go to your supervisor and know that, you deserve all the respect anyone else would get in there. So
right.
And hang in there. Hang in there if you can. If you can't move on, it is hard to get these jobs. You're absolutely right. Getting a resident position as an ALD in a regional theater company, that doesn't happen very often. However, if it's a company that knows what the hell they're doing, they're going to take care of it. And if they don't, then you shouldn't work there. Okay?
Right.
Because
Zero
they're
tolerance.
not going to take care of this. They're not
Right.
going to take care of this. They're not going to take care of a lot of things. And
Right.
it's just bad.
Right. So you are listening to Light Talk with the Lumen Brothers and Sister. And today's episode of Light Talk is sponsored by...
Oh my God, rigging. Serving the entertainment industry since 1940. When you need a rigging company that knows its stuff, you need Oh My God Rigging. We cut our teeth doing jobs that no one thought we could do starting in 1940 with the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. And since then, we've been learning from our mistakes. And what are some of those mistakes? Well, not knowing the weight of your load. Oh My God Rigging of Guero, Texas is known in the entertainment industry for our motto, "It'll be fine." 4 simple words that ensures our clients know that we know what we're talking about. We guarantee we can fine-tune that load to a ton or so just by looking at it, thus saving valuable time and money. But what else? Not doing timely equipment safety checks. As we ever expand and receive factory fresh equipment into our inventory, we take a Sharpie and write OK on each piece. Once the OK has worn off, we take that same Sharpie and write OK once more, ensuring the safety of our gear. No one in the industry would even consider doing this. But once again, oh my God, rigging is a leader, not a follower in innovation. Finally, choosing the correct span set. Nothing is more time-consuming than selecting a span set and not understanding the color code system. That's why we have sped up the process by painting all of our span sets safety yellow. No more fruit salad of colors, just plain old safety yellow. A child could pick the correct span set. So, the next time you need rigging, remember our motto. It'll be fine. And call Oh My God Rigging.
Well, I'll be calling them tomorrow. That's for sure. So, now back to Light Talk.
Well, the sound of those crazed monkeys, ducks, and iguanas bouncing around Light Talk Central tell us that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is all about Tharon Musser. That's right. The grandmother of lighting design. Or I shouldn't say grandmother. The mother of lighting design, I would say.
Well, wouldn't that be Jean Rosenthal?
That would be Jean Rosenthal, would be the grandmother of lighting design. Or maybe she'd be the great-grandmother. I don't know.
I don't know. Tharon's sort of the grande dame.
She's the grande dame of lighting design. Thank you, Ellen. That's even better.
How about that?
For those who don't know who Tharon Musser was, she designed so many shows on Broadway. She really was, to me, the person who brought great music and movement sensitivity to lighting on Broadway.
Yes, starting in the 1950s.
Right. And now, the reason why I know a lot about Tharon is because I knew Bill and Jean Eckhart for many years. And as a matter of fact, when I was an undergraduate student, I saw a chorus line. This was back in 1976 or something like that, 77. And I was looking for a grad school to go to. And she came down to Miami to light a show for the Miami Opera. And my lighting professor, his name's Kenneth Kurtz, wonderful, wonderful man and teacher, amazing designer teacher. He introduced me to her. And I was so impressed with the chorus line because that was the first show that I had seen that had the most incredible sensitive lighting that was totally integrated with the music and the movement of the actors and dancers through space. I'd never seen anything like it before. Now, again, I was very young and I hadn't seen a lot of shows, hadn't seen a lot of Broadway shows. But this show was transformative for me. And he introduced me to her, and it was thrilling to meet her. And she was so sweet. I told her about, how impressed I was with the show and everything else. And I told her that I really wanted to go to a good graduate school. And she asked me where I wanted to go, and I said Yale. And she knew I was a composer at the time. I think Ken gave her a little bit of information about me. And she said, no, you don't want to go to Yale. And I said, well, why? And she said, well, because if you go to Yale, they're not going to let you do any of your music. She goes, but the place you need to go to is SMU. And she said, the reason why is because SMU at the time was run by Bill and Jean Eckhart, who were classmates of hers at Yale back about 20 years before. And she knew that at SMU, I'd be able to do everything. I'd be able to do music and lighting and all that. And that was instrumental in my career. Absolutely. And of course, I took her advice. I mean, who wouldn't? Come on. And everything fell in place for me in my career, which was amazing. She knew it. She knew it because she was a great, sensitive person and very knowledgeable and rather brilliant, actually, when you think about it. And so when she started, she was, like I said, she was a classmate of Bill and Jean's at Yale. And the three of them actually moved onto Broadway together. Again, this is just from what I know. And they all got into the union together. And they did a lot of shows together with George Abbott as the director. And they did, how many shows, Ellen? You've got a list of a few, I know.
Her list of Broadway
just
shows.
the Broadway shows. Forget about all the opera she's done, all the dance she's done, everything else, which is hundreds and hundreds of shows.
Well, if you want to start in the 50s, Long Day's Journey into Night, Little Abner, Shinbone Alley, Monique, Macropolis Secret, The Chairs and the Lesson, The Infernal Machine, The Entertainer, The Firstborn, Shadow of a Gunman, J.B., The Rivalry, LeBeau Stratagem, Once Upon a Mattress, The Great God Brown, Only in America, Five Finger Exercise, Peer Gynt, The Long Dream, The Tumbler, The Garden of Sweets, Giants, Sons of Giants, Calculated Risk, Nowhere to Go But Up, Andorra, Mother Courage and Her Children, Here's Love, Marathon 33, Any Wednesday, The Seagull, The Crucible, Golden Boy, Alfie, Kelly, All in Good Time, Flora, The Red Menace, Minor, Miracle, Malcolm, The Great Indoors, The Lion in Winter, Mame, A Delicate Balance, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Hallelujah Baby, The Imaginary Invalid, A Touch of the Poet. Tonight at 8:30, The Birthday Party After the Rain, The Promise, Everything in the Garden, Lovers, Maggie Flynn, The Fig Leaves Are Falling, A Way of Life, The Gingham Dog, Blood Red Roses, Applause, The Boyfriend, Follies, The Trial of the Catonsville Nine, On the Town, The Prisoner of Second Avenue, Night Watch, The Creation of the World and Other Business, Don Juan, The Sunshine Boys, A Little Night Music, The Good Doctor, Candide, Scapino, Mac and Mabel, God's Favorite, Good News, The Wiz. Same time next year, A Chorus Line, which of course was her major revolutionary lighting piece, Me and Bessie, Pacific Overture, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, California Suite, The Act, Chapter 2, Tribute, Ballroom. They're playing our song, Whose Life Is It Anyway, 1940s Radio Hour, Romantic Comedy, Last Licks, Children of a Lesser God, I Ought to Be in Pictures, The Roast, 42nd Street, Fools, The Mooney Shapiro Songbook, Dreamgirls, Special Occasions, Merlin, Brighton Beach Memoirs, Private Lives, The Real Thing, Open Admissions, Biloxi Blues, The Odd Couple, Jerry's Girls, Broadway Bound, A Month of Sundays, Teddy and Alice, Rumors, Welcome to the Club, Artist Descending a Staircase, Lost in Yonkers, The Secret Garden, Jake's Women, The Goodbye Girl, Laughter on the 23rd Floor, Uncle Vanya, and The Lonesome West, and a revival of A Chorus Line.
These are all Broadway shows.
All Broadway shows. Yep.
Now,
3 of which she won Tonys. She won 3 Tonys. Best Lighting Design in 1982 for Dreamgirls, Best Lighting Design in 1976 for A Chorus Line, and Best Lighting Design in 1972 for Follies. And was nominated many other times. Oh, my God.
Yeah. It's unbelievable the amount of work she did on Broadway. And again, all created by this amazing artist and so sensitive to light music. It was all about music with her. It was all about music.
It was also all about color. And I'd like to read a little piece if it's not too long. There's a woman called Margie Heyman, who was a consultant to Roscoe.
Margie, yeah.
Who wrote a piece called Lighting Through the Glass Ceiling, Reflections on Tharon Musser. And you can find that piece on the Roscoe website. And she talked about how when they worked together, she said stage lighting was changing. Lamps were hotter, and like most designers, she had her favorite Roscoe lean colors that needed reformatting into the more heat-resistant base of Roxolux. She needed to make sure her hit shows, the ones that were always in production, like A Chorus Line, had the same consistency. Together, we created several Roscoe Lux colors, including R56 Gypsy Lavender, a tribute to the dancers in The Line, R05 Rose Tint, a historic color from across the Atlantic, and R96 Lime, an almost day-glow Roscoeline color that Tharon used in the Neil Simon trilogy that began with Brighton Beach Memoirs. So the tradition of working with Tharon Musser to create new colors continued after I stopped calling on her, and there was one notably R365 Tharon Delft Blue. Heyman goes on to say about Musser, she often said that sometimes designers specified too much equipment and just made mush on stage, or what she called supermarket lighting. You don't see a point of view on stage, just mush, she said. She believed in solving the technical problems at her drafting board, not by adding a lot of equipment to cover mistakes. On the subject of color, about which we had many discussions, she wrote in a brochure that we prepared, "It has to look right. It has to reflect your taste. If the color doesn't look right on stage, just change it."
Well, I will see your Roscoe article, and I will raise you. Here at Southern Methodist University in 1986, Tharon Musser did an interview about her thoughts and life's work. So we have a 66-page transcript here that you can check out for research, an interview with Tharon Musser talking about her work.
Where's that?
That is at our main library. You could contact the head of manuscripts, and they can hook you up.
Why don't we publish it? Well, shouldn't that be the first Light Talk published book?
Yeah, we will be our own publishers. No, that's good. I mean, we should look into that, Steve. If there's a way that that's digitized and get it out for our listeners, that'd be amazing. You know, it's really interesting when you mentioned about her seeing a point of view on stage. And I think that's really wonderful, that term point of view, because I use that a lot. And I learned it actually from her and some of her disciples. That's the idea. That is what is the idea on stage. You know, we posted her birthday on our Facebook group page, and a few people commented. And Thaddeus Strasburger, who we've had on the show, he's a director and a designer. He writes, "I remember there was an anecdote in this article where she said when interviewing an assistant, she would ask them what the sky looked like as they made their way to the interview. She said that the ability to describe that and what the light was doing was much more important than knowing gel numbers. She said, quote, there's a swatch book for that. But if you don't look and see, then that's a problem." I'm paraphrasing, but that's what I remember, and it still guides me today more than 35 years later. And that is exactly what I have been teaching my students for 40 years. And that is, it's learning how to see. It's not learning how to reproduce colors. You know, we talked about limelight earlier, but learning how to really see what the light is doing. It's a much more holistic experience. It's not only what you visually see what the light is doing, but what you emotionally feel of what the effect of the light is creating, which is what she was always striving for and what she was so good at doing. It was amazing. It really was. I once asked her how she came up with those final few cues in I Think I've Got It, which was the opening number of a chorus line. It's this very complex series of like 5 or 6 cues as the dancers circle around in the middle and they get their headshots, and then they come out, they break out from upstage and they all march downstage, and then there's that bump to the line. And I said, you know, that's one of the most brilliant sequences I've ever seen. How did you come up with this? And you know what her answer was? She said, I saw it in rehearsal. And that's, yeah, I mean, that's where it all happens. You see it happening in your mind's eye, and that's the point of view of those cues. And I just think that's really a beautiful, beautiful thing. Keith Elrod, one of our listeners, he wrote, I miss her dearly. I owe my career to her. She hired me as master electrician for one of the 2 chorus line road companies. I would correspond with her every tour stop. When I got to Broadway, she always had my back. She, of course, already had a stable crew of electricians to which I learned a lot from. I will always be grateful for her taking me under her fold and including me in that special group. This is the type of person Tharon was. She would have been 99 years old this week.
Yep, yesterday. Yep.
Yeah, and I think that we should just take a moment and thank Tharon because she made our art, our profession, what it is today.
Right. And you know that for a chorus line, it was the first use of a computerized board on Broadway.
That's right.
So it was very
because
revolutionary.
she couldn't do it otherwise.
Right.
She, I mean, what she had in her mind's eye, there was no way you could run this on a piano board or even a preset board. There's no way you could do it. And she did not have the advanced technology that we've had over the past 20 years or so. I mean, she didn't have moving lights. She didn't have LEDs. She didn't have any of this stuff. She did this mostly with Licos, Pars, Fresnels, and any other incandescent fixture she can get her hands on. I think the most technically innovative fixture she had in her arsenal were color wheels that she used on Ballroom. And I remember her explaining to my class, because I was a grad student at this time, and she was lecturing in our class about how she used the color wheels to dynamically change the color on stage. And I thought that was really kind of cool. Could you imagine what Tharon would have done with a bunch of Verilights? I mean, you did mention also what she said about all these lights that people use. She said, it just takes too much time to focus 300 lights. How do you find that time to focus those on Broadway when you could be using that time creating atmospheres at the table? So brilliant. You know, again, that's another thing that I try to teach my students. It's not how much equipment you have, it's really how much time you have to create the atmospheres, you know, at the table.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think if you count them up, that she actually worked on more than 150 Broadway shows.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think the only person who's coming close to that is Ken Billington.
Yeah, you know, and Ken was very close with Tharon as well. I mean, just think about how many people assisted her. You know, I mean, like Kirk Bookman and Richard Winkler and Kurt Osterman and I think Ken assisted her at one time too.
He did.
Well, maybe next year for Tharon Musser's birthday, we should have all those people on and do like a...
Wouldn't that be cool? That would be so awesome.
I was just going to bring something up, you know, in that the lighting family tree that Michael Chaibolsky sent us that will be in his upcoming book. Under Tharon Musser, you get Mickey Kinsella, Ann Sullivan, Ken Porter, David Siegel, and then Gilbert Helmsley.
Yeah.
Under Peggy Clark, you get Ken Billington. And then under Ken and Gilbert, there's a million assistants and a whole long list under Tharon as well, with Jeff Davis, Richard Winkler, as you mentioned before, Marilyn, Kurt Osterman, Rick Belzer, Vivian Leone, tons and tons of people.
Yeah. Tons of people. It's amazing. That's the beauty of our business, is that you have these trees of artists that are all influenced by their tree. That's all an influence. I mean, I was under Gilbert's, you know, and Gilbert was like, there's so much I do that is really what Gilbert taught me. There's no way that you can not be affected by that art. It's just amazing. All right. Well, Steve, you have the last question of the day.
Sure. It comes from Carl in Germany, and he asks, how often do you attend load-in, and what do you do once you're there? Well, it depends on where the load-in is. If it's at school, then, I kind of show up and I see what the electricians are up to, and I'm there 1 or 2 times a day just checking with them to see if they need me for anything. If it's a small theater, like a little teeny tiny theater, I may be there with a crescent wrench in my hand helping people out. If it's at a Lort theater or off Broadway, not so much. I get with the master electrician and the assistant, and we work out in advance what that schedule is going to be, and I very much do what they tell me to do. So sometimes someone says, we want you there just in case there's a question or what else you got to do, come by, load in. More often than not, on those larger theaters, the master electrician will say, I don't need to see you for a day or two. You know, you're welcome to stop by, but don't come and get in the way. And I don't want to do anything to slow their work down. So I like to attend load-in. I like to see what's going on. I like to be there to get a feel for the theater. I like to find reasons to be sitting in the back working on a magic sheet or something. But it depends. You know, a lot of times you're just in the way until they're ready for you. They're making the space ready for you to come in and do your next series of work, you know, the focus, the cueing. David, what about you? Are you a load-in groupie?
No, I'm not a load-in groupie, but if I'm not there, my assistant will be there. Because I'll tell you, I learned the hard way that if you aren't there, or if your assistant, at least your assistant's not there, things can go wrong.
Surely not.
If you show up 4 days later and they've hung that plot incorrectly, that's going to be a problem. I always make sure that either I'm there or my assistant's there. Just the last show I did, I had an issue with my assistant was there, and she caught an issue with the way they were hanging one pipe. And she had to tell them, you know, hey, guys, you see here on the plot where it says Oh, yeah. You never know who you're going to get on your crew.
A true story. I show up at this small college in the Midwest. Limon is on tour. And I show up, and when I get there, there's like a bunch of students waiting for me at the stage door. And they go, "How many booms do you need?" And I said, "Well, 8. And they said, "How high are your booms?" And I said, "Oh, about 18 feet. And they turned around and stormed off, and I followed them in. Their technical director, it's hard to believe, but I promise I'm not making this up, had built me 4 booms on one side of the stage that were indeed 18 feet high, but he missed the note that said repeat on stage right. He took the 4 overhead electrics, which were about 30 feet long, and he vertically stood those up on stage right with all the lights on them.
What?
I know. It sounds like this. No one is that dumb, but and when I walked,
how were they indicated? Weren't they indicated as horizontal pipes on the plot?
Of course they were.
So why do you think they were booms?
Well, the key phrase here was the technical director. They didn't have an electrician, and when I walked in, I heard someone go like, and I'm just making this up, "I told you, Mr. Johnson, this was a mistake."
Oh dear! How did they get those horizontal pipes to stand up vertically?
They winched them into place and had them tied off to the grid and
oh dear,
sandbags. It looked like a scene out of Iwo Jima.
Oh dear! And what did you do?
I said we need to take all this down on stage right, and we need to rethink this.
You see, and that's a problem because that was a school. But if you're working, as you know, Steve, you're working in a profession, you only have 8 hours to load in. Then you start, then you have to ring the system out for 4 hours. And then you have to start focusing. You don't have time to make those changes. And it's, you're going to have to deal with those 30-foot vertical pipes on stage, right?
And you're absolutely right, because that's when you do have to make hard, fast decisions on what can I do to be ready for the company.
But who needs that? I mean, that's why just to have your assistant there would solve all those problems. I would never, ever, ever not have somebody, representing me there. And because I just don't, I've just seen too many disasters.
Oh, agreed.
And again, this is something that Gilbert told me. Because I asked Gilbert, when do you want me there? He goes, "I want you there all the time." I said, okay, that's fine. I can be there all the time because believe me, there's enough work for an assistant to do that I can do at the tech table while they're loading in the show. That's not a problem. But I learned that, and it's really important. It's not that you don't trust them, but they may have a question. Or something may come up. Maybe as they're unloading the scenery from the truck, there could be like, "Oh my God, that wall is not green. It's now maroon. Does David know this? I better call him. Hey, David, those lights that we were hitting the wall with? Well, they're not green anymore. They're now maroon. Do you want me to make a change in the color?" You know what I mean? Stuff like that happens. It really does. And sometimes the set designer would say, "Yeah, I want to change it to maroon," but he's never told you that. It just never happened, and that communication broke down. So you need to know this stuff before the lights go on the pipe.
Or the sound designer got there first, and you get there, and they go, "Yeah, who the hell ordered all these lights? Where are we going to put them? Where do you want them? There's no room up there."
Right, exactly. And the sound designer you never get the sound plotter, or they've changed it, and they're now like an array of speakers downstage left that's blocking all your box boom shots. It's like, you may want to check this out and talk to the sound designer.
Or the set designer decided to add a ceiling at the last minute. Okay. Oh, my God. These are all the nightmares that happen. Hey, speaking of nightmares, remember when we talked about recurring nightmares, about nightmares you have for the profession? I talked about this nightmare about getting out. I have a new nightmare now. It's that I had it the other night that I had 2 opening nights happening in the same city of 2 shows that I never focused. So I said, how did these shows go up? So I was going to opening night, and I'm saying, and people were coming up to me saying, "Oh, David, the lighting is great in the show," and I never even showed up for the show. So who did the lights? It was crazy, and there were 2 of them
And oh my God, enough of that. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tell us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website at lighttalk.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate, the Snoop Group with the legal team of Sparks, Burnout, and Chase will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers and Sister, coming to you from St. Bart's, the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood, and the Lone Star State.
And be sure to join us next week when we talk about more lighting shenanigans and serve you more of our casserole of nonsense.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
And we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Toodles.
Bye-bye.